Hello to everyone, and welcome to the second brown bag on the topic irrigation technology and women's empowerment in India. Thank you for joining me and Jamie, and thanks for the Humanities Institute, especially Adrian and Susan, for giving us a chance to informally talk about our research project from the ground up. Also, I would like to acknowledge the work of the Institute for Globalization and International Relations, which is a brand new major for our students that includes a concentration in environmental studies. As we learned from our very first Zoom lunch, informal talks like these are the most interesting and inspiring because we get to share our ideas and also learn from you. In fact, last time, several of you had questions about the irrigation technology and even had ideas about how the technology might work, not just in Gujarat, where Jamie and I did our field research, but also in Vietnam, in Kenya, in Native American communities in the United States, and even here on Long Island. So just as before, we look forward to your comments and questions. And we have two members of the audience here that I will definitely want to acknowledge. One is Drupti Jain, one of the co-creators of the irrigation project that we're talking about today, and also Drupti Thakkar, who is one of the interpreters. Yay, everyone. So we hope to be able to see you guys and have you engaged in the conversation, and of course with our other members today. I wanted to say that at the core of our research really is interdisciplinary perspectives in the sciences and humanities. And I believe that they really are fundamentally useful to our students who, in this particular case, justifiably see climate change as one of the important challenges of their lives. So in the first Zoom lunch, we presented the story of our field research, including how months and even years afterwards, Jamie and I had to re-examine the data we had gathered from personal interviews with farmers in rural communities who needed an irrigation solution and realize our own biases, that our perspectives on women's empowerment were ethnocentric, and as a result, did not properly really represent the needs and desires of the women farmers. So actually, once we returned to the United States, the digital framework and the format that we used to explore our data further helped us re-examine really our assumptions in much the same way that teams of scientists, after collecting data on, for example, cell structures, find new ways of looking at those structures from different angles. So in the second brown bag conversation here, we're going to focus on visualization tools and the archival data format that enabled us to re-examine our assumptions and identify our biases. We will introduce the work of Marc Schmidt. Hi, Christian. Okay, of Schema design on visualization techniques. And then we're going to focus on our own Stony Brook University libraries, Shafeek Fazal, hi Shafeek, and Victoria Pilato, on the process of developing an archival digital collection. But before we do this, I think it's really useful, I learned from last time actually, to show a few short videos on the irrigation technology, Bhungroo, so that you can get an idea of how the technology works in rural communities in Gujarat. Then after the videos, and they're very short, both of them are about 2 minutes long, Jamie will discuss how collecting stories enabled us to tell a larger story, seeing the patterns and narratives, and how open access data gives us opportunities for lots of different people to use their frames to see stories and patterns, to learn through discovery and activity rather than passive information. Sorry about that. And form their own stories. As Marshall McLuhan has said, we recognize that the media we use is the message, and our message is of equity, respect, and openness. After Jamie speaks, then Christian will show the visualization for this project, as well as other examples of a much larger project. of much larger projects, I should say. And finally, Shafeek and Victoria will discuss their work and commitment to the digital projects that begin, like ours did, really with one idea and led to many considerations of you. I really have to emphasize you, because it's the viewers, it's the audience, it's the user experience that is really what makes this, the digital format and digital collection so very important. So we will leave plenty of time for Q&A, and we want to hear from you. So please feel free to write your questions, your comments in the chat box. And after our remarks, we'll definitely unmute those who would like to speak. So bear with me for a moment here while I bring up the videos, and I'm pretty sure I won't have any problem, but you know.
You got this.
I got it, right. Okay, so here we have that. We have this. Okay, so then the first one is going to be Drupti Jain, one of the co-founders of Narita Services. And so this is a short video about her and the work.
I'm Drupti Jain, and I'm a co-founder member of the Narita Services Private Limited. Agriculture sector is flooded with the problems, but we are trying to solve the three kinds of the problems. One is that the agricultural land is affected by the drought. Second problem is that women farmers doesn't have the land rights. Third problem is that local farmers are not aware about the lots of technological innovations happening in all over the globe. Bhungroo is our innovation technology which inject the water for the irrigation purpose, and it makes the land from the uncultivable to the cultivable. Bhungroo program is to develop the capacities of the women farmers in the specific agricultural related areas on the technological aspect as well as on the informal aspects. Women are contributing in the agriculture sectors a lot, but somehow it's not recognized by our community or by our society and the civil organizations. So we just want to formalize these informal services into the formal way. At this time, we have engaged with the nearly 3,000 smallholders, and it has a potential to reach every woman across the globe. It's my dream that each and every woman who is contributing in the agriculture sector should be recognized.
Okay, okay, now what I have to remember to do is turn this off. No, turn it off. There, I did that. Okay, great. Now I want to show you the second one. So that was Drupti Jain, and her partner, her husband, Bipla Paul, is featured in the next video.
It was a very caustic experience.
Okay.
When I picked up my work in the developmental sector, it was a very caustic experience picking up a profession where there is no money, no respect, no dignity. Gujarat is one of the driest Indian states with temperatures soaring really high in summers. Farming communities endure this agonizing heat only to let heavy monsoons ruin their lives again. In most Indian states, erratic rains leads to waterlogging, and for the rest of the year, farmers experience severe water scarcity. That's when I started looking for a solution, and the idea of Bhungroo took shape. Bhungroo is a water harvesting technique that filters, injects, and stores excess stormwater within subsoil, which the farmer can use for irrigation in months without water. The interesting part is that the whole process is led by women. Initially, it was me alone because there was nobody trusting me. I was in the verge of collapsing psychologically, physically, and I wasn't earning anything. And each failure was a good learning to go ahead. A single unit of Bhungroo caters to 22 acres of land and holds up to 40 million liters of water. We have transformed over 40,000 acres of barren lands, helping marginal farmers all over India.
ભૂંગળું બનાવવાના લીધે અમને અલગ અલગ જાતના અમે પાકો વાવી શકીએ છીએ, અલગ અલગ ઋતુઓ લઈ શકીએ છીએ અને તેના લીધે અમારી આવક વધી છે અને મોટા ભાઈએ અમને બની આપ્યું છે, તેમાંથી અમને ભરોસો છે આગળ વધી શકશે.
The best change is that their monsoon crop is saved. If you save the monsoon crop, you are saving the food. If they have the food, they don't need to go and beg in front of them. We are close to 4,000 units on the ground, and some of them also in Southeast Asia and Africa. And now my next target is to reduce the cost as cheap as possible with a guaranteed return for the farmer. My mom taught me a simple thing. You're a good student, higher studies is good, but these are useless if you cannot bring smiles to someone else's face. I think I can slog another 100 years. Nobody can stop me. I am Biplab Pitan Paul. I have guided farmers to reach for better.
Okay, I think I did that okay. Oh, technology is really hard. It's funny. Anyway, okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Jamie now and let her talk about the stories and the narratives.
Yeah, thank you, Peg. And thank you all for coming. So these are great videos to watch because I feel like we're all used to sort of just assuming how things work or what different places look like. Like, for instance, I had a certain assumption of what irrigation or what this technology, the Bhungroo, would look like. And my presupposition was very different than what we just saw. And I think that this is a main message of sociologists like myself, right? The push for ourselves and others to resist the impulse to assume things about other people and the world. You know, it's certainly normal and necessary to make some assumptions, or even a lot of them. Mostly because, I mean, it would be really difficult to focus on completing a goal if we have to question literally everything about everything the whole time. So I think, at least for me as a sociologist, I spend a lot of time appropriating the wisdom of some children who incessantly ask, I'm sure a lot of you have children, you know, incessantly ask, like, how, why, what, for what reason? While my constant questioning is, you know, I like to think of it as a little more focused, specifically on interrogating my own
Uh-oh, there's a frozen part here. Uh-oh.
Assumptions, as well as that of others. Am I frozen?
You're okay. You were a little bit, now you are now again. Try it again. Oh, she's frozen again. Can you bring assumptions? I'm going to think about assumptions here. Okay. Okay. So I happen to actually have Jamie's script in front of me. I wonder, Jamie, should I go ahead and contribute your comments while you unfreeze, maybe? That might be a good idea. So one of the things that Jamie was talking about as we were preparing for this, which is really, really significant, is to have what she calls epistemic humility, to recognize that we don't actually know how an irrigation system, let alone the Bhungroo technology actually works, but that we're educators and that we want to present information that awakens people's interests and encourages them to ask questions, even incessantly. So Jamie wrote that when she gives academic presentations, people always ask good questions great academic presentations. I'm sure everybody's been to them, you know, where you have a lecture and then you presented with research findings and questions. And you're generally expected to relate to the speaker's main arguments and data and so forth. And this is a great process for academics, of course. But one of the things that Jamie reflected upon was the idea that it's really important to love collecting stories, photos, videos, and so forth with many different people that we enjoyed, and to present them in this collection. In the process, hopefully in the end result, to encourage some deep questioning and curiosity of our audience. So rather than an academic article or PowerPoint presentations, the websites and the things that Christian and Victoria and Shafeek and many, many folks have helped us with is really to marry then critical thinking. And so that is a significant aspect of this project, and having the resources and website free allows people in different places to use this information to discover their own patterns from their own frames and so forth. So we interpret the patterns, Jamie and I, as she reflects upon this, definitely interpret the patterns, but we also know that there are other ways to interpret the data. And we hope that by providing this for you, we can all learn and continue the process both in the sciences and the humanities, and really encourage questioning, self-reflection, and empathy. Okay, so I'm so sorry that Jamie had to froze, but I'm glad to know that I have her comments in front of me, and now we can go ahead and turn it over to Christian, who will provide a few examples of digital collections, and starting off with the Bhungroo.
That sounds great. Thanks, Peggy. All right, so I was going to just say a couple words on who I am and also the company that I founded. So maybe we can start there, and I'll then get to the actual website in a minute as well. Let's see if I can share my screen. Okay, so let me know if you can see. Can you see the logo?
The black screen. The black
screen with Schema. Okay, perfect. Yeah. Just making sure.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So so it's great to be here. I'm the founder and principal of Schema, and we're a research and design firm based in Seattle. And you know, it was really a pleasure to help with this project, and looking forward to showing you the results in just a moment. So just briefly on who we are. So we, like I said, we focus on research and design. We sort of combine two different areas of focus, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute: data visualization and also content strategy. And whoops, did that just, let's try that again. Oh, sorry about that. For some reason, it is not. Let me try something a little different here. Okay, if I just try not to go into full screen mode. Are you still able to see my slides now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And we'll just do it like this.
Sure.
So in terms of the work that we do, we think about how we could put work into the world that could spark conversation. And in particular, you know, I think if you look back at this year, this has made it very, very clear to me that we have a need to get beyond the sort of polarized rhetoric to look at topics, complex issues and topics in a more factual way. And that's a lot of how we look at the work that we do here, where we might start with a given topic or even a given data set. And by holding ourselves to a standard of neutrality and objectivity, which is admittedly a high standard, we aim to put work out there into the world that can help people discover these topics on their own in order to find their own perspectives. And so the work breaks out into two types of work usually, which often actually come together in the projects that we take on. There's work that is about explanation. In other words, data-driven storytelling or data journalism. And then there's also work that is more about exploration, which is more open-ended, giving people the systems and the tools they can use to discover their own insights and their own stories. And so kind of like I talked about in the beginning, we combine two fields. On the one hand, there's interaction, and on the other hand, interpretation. And together they produce understanding. That's sort of how we think about it. They help us turn information into understanding. And so these map to data visualization and content strategy. And before I dive into the work, just real quick on these two areas. There's obviously more that could be said here, but at a high level, data visualization experiences or data visualization interfaces, they work at three levels. There's the overview, which is really about being able to step back and see the data, see a data set in its entirety, essentially understanding the scope of the data. And then there's control, sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum, which is the ability to dive in and look at individual data points. Right, that's important to us so that you're not looking at aggregate data, but you're actually able to dive into the individual data object. And then in the middle, we have comparison, which is really the idea that when you have these two, overview and control, you can begin to make comparisons. You can look for patterns. You can look for outliers. And ultimately, you can find your own stories, like I was talking about. And then on the content strategy side, we think of three layers that you can dive in through in order to tell a story, starting with engagement. So drawing people in, creating that initial engagement that can help disseminate these topics more broadly. I think this is especially important for academic studies and research papers. This is something we do a lot of. So drawing people in and then providing the context so they can, again, understand the subject matter and the sort of the relevance and the impact that it had. And finally, reference, which is really then the ability to connect to other resources to deepen your experience. All right, and so with that, I wanted to then dive into the website first. I'm gonna actually, let's see, now I have to switch things up a little bit here. Okay, perfect. All right, so we're gonna start with Mirroring Hope. So this is the Bhungroo related website that we worked on with Peggy and Jamie. And so it consists really of two components. There's an interpretive component, which is what you're looking at here. And I'll show you that in a minute. And then there's the more interactive component. So it's sort of mirroring the structure that I was just talking about, content strategy and data visualization. So beginning here at the top, we introduced the topic, and there's a video that you can see playing in the background. We worked a lot on the structure of the narrative. So this was a big focus here, and you keep in mind that we were sort of coming at this in the sense of taking an academic study and presenting it in such a way that it could find an even broader audience, that it could really draw people in who might otherwise not have known that this would be a topic they'd be interested in. And so we structured it a little bit like an article, right? It begins with the headline and then the introduction, from which you dive into the actual geography, identifying the Gujarat villages that were part of the study, and then going through the actual technology as well. So here we tried to simplify it through an infographic that you would see unfold as you scroll down. And so this is a way of just helping people understand how this technology works. And so there you can see how that kind of unfolds. And then as you continue, you get deeper into the narrative. We have photos that contextualize it. These were taken during the study, so it's a really effective way of, there's the actual technology, or the water pump.
Yeah.
And And Peggy, if you want to say anything here too, feel free to
Yeah,
chime in with maybe with more details on the study, which I can't represent as much.
Yeah, these are all photos
Yeah.
that Amy and I took when we were in Gujarat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then so you basically get deeper into it as you scroll down, and then towards the end you get into the main findings. So this is really a summary of the findings and the takeaways. And then lastly, about the authors. And then we have a couple of resources as well, links that people can explore. So that's the narrative piece. And then if I switch over to the profiles, this is really in a way, the qualitative data behind the study, and you're able to explore it on your own. So these were all the participants, or all the people that were interviewed. And on the one hand, you can click on anyone here to understand a bit more who they are. And then you can also break out the information in a variety of different ways. So this would be looking at literacy, for example. And you can also obviously break it out by gender too. And then there's a variety of other factors. Total family members, for instance, is an interesting one to look at. And maybe grab one more. How many people in your household? Or are your children studying? So it gives you a way to break out the data by yourself in order to, hopefully come away with some deeper insights about the population that was interviewed here as part of the study. And again, Peggy, if you want to add anything here, please chime in.
No, this is what I really love about this, and something that we will be doing with you dear participants, at the end of at the conclusion of our presentations here, is to let you try something out for us. We're going to do an interactive kind of piece in a minute here, so it'll be great to see that.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, this was obviously the topic of the conversation today. I wanted to then quickly share a few other projects as well that take some of these ideas and translate them in slightly different ways. So yeah, maybe jumping into, is that a good segue?
Yeah, it's a great segue, Christian. I think one of the things that I wanted to just let you guys understand more about is that this was our project, and what Christian's going to show you is a couple other examples of the way you use visualization in your own research. Mm-hmm. And one of them actually won the German Design Award, which is a huge award this year, and with participants all over, 500 participants all over Europe. And so these are really interesting and compelling, because you get to use these visualization techniques to think of your own and observe your own patterns and other patterns as well. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, sounds good. So the first example I wanted to show is related to obviously the project we're discussing today, and that it's also a digital collection. And so we do a fair amount of work around digital collections and how to visualize them, how to make them more engaging. It's sort of along the lines of taking an archive and being able to open it up to people so they can find stories and insights and interesting information within it. So this one was a project with Knoll, the American design firm. They have a really storied history going all the way back to, as you can see here, the early 1900s. And so part of this project was just a way of showcasing the timeline of Knoll, of this company, through the lens of people, objects, and events. And so because Knoll focuses really on design, a lot of the people you'll see here are famous designers like Philip Johnson or Eero Saarinen. And they are then affiliated with a variety of different movements and products. So it becomes really a great resource for designers and design enthusiasts. And so here, for example, if I go and click on let's take Herbert Matter, for instance, then it will show me more information about this person, about this designer, but also let me connect to other related objects, which would be, again, products, events, and other people as well. So for example, he designed the original Knoll logo, as I can find out here. And so I can essentially browse the entire chronology of Knoll through these types of relationships. So we can maybe jump ahead here to more recent times, look at the 1980s. And again, I can perhaps click on Richard Meyer here and look at some of the work that he did for Knoll. And then at any point you can get more information as well. You can sort of dive in and look at these various products and people and so forth. So that's one piece of it. And from here, I can then also step back and actually look at the entire ecosystem or the entire universe of people, objects, and events through the lens of the connections that they form. And this is very similar to the Bhungroo project in that all of this information was manually gathered. So it was really an editorial or a curatorial effort, I should say. And so from here, you can then zoom in and you can look at, just like before, you can look at individual objects in more detail. So if we take this one, for example, you can zoom in and take a closer look. So this, I think, in many ways is the signature view within this experience and links all the other views together. And then there's one more which we could look at here, which is a more of a grid-based view. So this lets you also look at information chronologically, but you can sort it in a variety of other ways as well. And you can filter it by theme. So maybe we might want to look at, let's take women in design, for example. So that would filter down the data sets to those relevant people and related objects. So I think I'll leave it there for Knoll. There's a lot more that could be said, but in the interest of time, let's take a look at the next one. This is the lifespan of news stories and the project that Peggy was referencing just a minute ago. So we were excited to receive the German Design Award for 2021 for this project. Even though the project itself actually is a little older in that it's looking at the news cycle of 2018. So that's, it feels like an eternity ago, actually, when I think back to it. But it was a very tumultuous year. And so here we worked with Google and Axios, the news channel Axios, on identifying the top stories of the year. And so we ended up with about 50 of these top stories. And we then, we used the Google API to understand the popularity of each story over the course of the year. So we went back and looked at how many times people were searching on these news stories. And so that's what you see represented here through the graph at the top. So you might remember some of these stories. So here you can see, and the graphs again represent the search interest, as it's called, which you can parse through the level of intensity, but also the overall the breadth of time, essentially, during which this issue was popular, something people were searching on. And so, one of the interesting things about this is it lets you, in a way, it lets you look back at the year through the lens of what people were actually really interested in, as opposed to the news cycle, which we're so used to, the day-to-day news cycle. This is a little bit more of a retrospective. And one of the things you can see pretty clearly is that some of the biggest issues actually were the hurricanes, Hurricane Florence, and there was another one later, the Hurricane Michael, that really reached the most search interest of any of these topics. And if you compare that to some of the other topics that you see here, it's really quite telling. The climate report is the one I always like to use as a comparison, because it's so minimal in terms of search interest. And that can tell you something, right, about what we as a society might be interested in. You can click on individual stories, and this will take you off to the Axios articles that were written about these topics at the time. And then down below, we also have a map where you can see the spread, the geographic spread over time. So you can sort of see how these news stories originate, usually on the East Coast, and then kind of spread across the country. And then the last thing I just wanted to highlight here, we analyzed the graphs as well to understand if there was a pattern among topics of the same genre or category. And so, you know, we came up with a couple of prototypical patterns that you can see here: symmetric, skewed left, skewed right, non-symmetric, and then looked at whether these were actually borne out if you were to overlap all of the news articles and their search interest by category. And we did actually see some really interesting patterns over time. So this would be looking at politics and elections, which tend to be a little bit more spread out compared to natural catastrophes, which is more that skewed left representation. You know, they happen suddenly and then there's a long fallout. This, let's see, environment and science is a little bit similar, but a bit more focused. Social issues, a bit more like the politics or the political issues, more drawn out. And anyway, there's a few more obviously here as well. Obituaries is one. But this gives you a different way of looking at the news and understanding, again, what topics were really relevant to us as a society. I think we're probably just about out of time, but maybe the last one I'll just quickly allude to without getting into too much detail.
Right, good idea.
Yeah, and then I'll turn it over. This one might be interesting for you to look at afterwards, but it's Legislative Explorer, which is a visualization of bills in Congress. And so we built a version of this for the United States Congress. And the version we're looking at here is on the local level here for Washington State. But what this lets you do is essentially track every bill as it's introduced in every 2-year session of Congress. You can hover over to see more information. You can see who the sponsors were, and you know, the lines represent the path of the bills as they move through the process of legislation. And then you can filter in a variety of different ways as well. We have, you know, you can filter by party, obviously, Democrat, Republican sponsored bills. But some of the more interesting filters are gender and topic. And so this gives you, again, a way to really break down that data and find your own stories. And I would just encourage you, because we don't have time here, but if you take a look at it later, it's really quite interesting, and it gives you a way to essentially pull back the curtain on government and what is actually going on behind the scenes that we might not be fully aware of.
Thank you, Christian. And I noticed there was a note from somebody that said that the slides were a little hard to read, but not to worry about that, because we can send you, now that we know who's here at the end, I'll be able to thank you guys very much for attending and send you the visualization so you can really take a look at them. That would be great. Thank you so much. Wow. As you can see, we have some very interesting comments about how to get out of your own media echo chamber, which is very interesting in that regard. So thank you, Christian. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is turn it over then. This was sort of the introductory window into the Stony Brook University Libraries digital collection, which is really designed for people who want to deep dive into the interviews and from all sorts of angles. So I'm going to turn it over to Shafeek and Victoria to let them talk about that.
Thanks,
That's great. Thank you, Peg. Thank you, Peg. So I'll start off, and then Victoria will take on with the slides and go through the entire process and give some good details on how we went through this project. But first, I want to say thank you for this opportunity to present one aspect of the library operation as we get very much involved into building collections. And I emphasize building because, you know, libraries is all about acquiring collections, facilitating the access, and also preserving, right? But it's always been in the sense that the libraries acquire the collection from elsewhere, not so much build the collections themselves. So about 5 to 6 years ago, we started up our digitization program in the library. I will say PEG was one of our first customers for this, I would say, but as an instructor here, working with students, acquiring content, there has to be a way for us to collect, build the collections, provide access, and also preserve these content for posterity. So we started our program. Victoria has been leading our program ever since, doing a wonderful job. We have built several collections. We have a team of library faculty and staff that gets very engaged with this in all aspects of collection building. Kristen, you did a wonderful presentation on visualizations. One of your presentation with the timeline, it reminds me very well of our, we have a Javits collection, a digital collection on the Javits lifetime documents. And we have a wonderful timeline, very similar to that. So it really reminds me of that, and how all of us here, we can take data and present it in certain ways. So we sort of facilitate that access. We make our user end, look at data in different lights, right? And get the tools needed to do that. So that's what we're all about. We have the Javits. We have several other collections we built. Like I said, we work with PEG for some time now. This is our second project with PEG. We have a wonderful project that we started off with on oral history with the US Women Asian History Collection. We have worked with other faculty members building collections. And so PEG started off by saying, these information should be accessible, should be openly accessible. And that's another area too, that one of our core mission is, as we build these collections, we want to make sure the access is there. It's not locked down behind some paywall or some other means of preventing access. So we have to make these things openly accessible. And we have always been striving to do that in every aspect that we can. In some cases, we don't have all the rights to do that from creators of information, but we have to work around that. So I'll turn it over now to Victoria to tell you more detail about what we do in the library, but also tell you about how we manage this collection, a wonderful collection that PEG and Jamie, their travels, they went, they collect data, they have all these content. And in the past, if there was no way and means of safeguarding these data, acquiring, collecting, preserving, then they will just sit on someone's hard drive somewhere and gets lost, in the future. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity as data is information being created, and our aspect in the library of taking this and providing access and preserving the data. So let me stop there and hand it over to Victoria to go through some of the details.
Thanks, Shafeek. I'm sharing my screen right now. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah, I think.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Peg and Jamie, for inviting Shafeek and I to speak at this brown bag lunch, and for thinking about the libraries to make this collection a reality and available for research. So this is the first slide that Shafeek kind of touched upon already, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. But SBU libraries, we play a role in digital collection building, and this is kind of the our role was for file management preservation, to make things accessible. Sometimes we're only digitizing or creating collections for preservation purposes. For whatever reason, we can't make something accessible. Although we do try to make things as accessible as possible whenever we can for research, whether that's just for the SBU community because of any restrictions on the collection, whether it's a donor restriction or the person who actually is creating the material proposes a restriction that way. So once a digital collection or a project is accepted by the SBU libraries, it goes, basically that the agreement is we will be storing and managing that data and files for its life cycle, which is, let me share my next slide, which basically the slide states, so all projects that are accepted to join the digital collections are stored and managed until there's a reason for that collection to be deaccessioned, for whatever that reason might be, which is true for every item that the library holds, whether it's a print item or a digital file. So again, we store, manage, and preserve the files, and we try to keep this collection discoverable and accessible through its entire life cycle, following current guidelines for description and preservation, which change over time. You can imagine digital preservation is still an ongoing and tough subject to really get a handle on. And we're currently working on our own digital preservation system here. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about oral histories at Stony Brook University as far as the library collections go. So we definitely have an uptick in building more oral history collections at SBU libraries, which we had a couple in our legacy digital collection repositories. But when I started SBU libraries, I was introduced to Peg, who was creating this great interview collection with her students in Women in US Asian Relations class. And it was great because it was a course related project and it was basically student led. The students went out and interviewed women for this collection. So we did 2 semesters worth for that collection materials, which is available on our website. So with that, we were excited, Shafeek and I were excited to learn about this new oral history project for the Bhungroo collection. In addition to that, we have more oral history projects starting. We have a COVID archive collection being built right now, where there's going to be an oral history component to that as well, just to hear people's stories about how they've been dealing with the pandemic and as it relates to Stony Brook University. So a couple of things that I wanted to point out about oral history building is that there are so many great tools available for building oral history projects and making them accessible, which we are currently undertaking, doing a lot of research now, because currently, which I will show you soon with the Bhungroo collection, Burying Hope collection, is that there's still tools that we need to start using here to make these oral histories more accessible. So like watching or listening to an audio recording or video recording and seeing a timestamp transcript that goes along with that, I think is really important for users, and especially for accessibility reasons. And that's something we're working on right now, especially since our oral history collections are growing.
I just want to make a quick plug here that our COVID-19 archive project, the oral history, is ongoing. Any one of you on this call, if you're interested in giving us your experiences and the COVID pandemic, reach out to us. We're doing these interviews right now.
Great.
Okay, so the actual project proposal for the Bhungroo Burying Hope collection, Peg contacted Stony Brook University Libraries in spring semester of 2019. That's where we're introduced to Schema and also met Jamie. We had a bunch of meetings. They were really informative and really interesting. And we were excited to get, moving on this collection, and also understanding more about Schema and what Christian was going to be creating. It was, pretty clear that we were just going for, as far as the libraries go, really make this a repository full of all the data, and not really focus much on, making a timeline or doing anything that we knew Schema was going to be able to handle and provide. So that was really great to know from the beginning. So I was just focused on getting all of the content into the repository. So we had grant deadlines. Unfortunately, a symposium we were supposed to have in the spring wasn't able to happen because of the pandemic, but these brown bag lunches are fantastic. So luckily we have this. We had meetings. I compiled team members for the project. I can't create or build any digital collection without a large team. So I always work with our metadata librarians, multimedia resource specialists, a repository programmer, web services librarian, and students. I rely heavily on student work. So I'm lucky to have a team of student workers, which are employed by the libraries, so they do get paid. And I could not build these collections without them. So the mirroring,
that's great.
they play a big part. So for the Mirroring Hope, building this digital collection, Peg had created a Google Drive project folder, and that's where we all had access to. So this was where all the data and files lived, and I went there to organize everything so I could prepare it for the digital collection, to do file naming, gather all the related files together, because they were in different folders, so I had to match everything. And I really relied on student help for this. They listened to the recordings. They did quality assurance on the recordings to make sure everything was clear. We matched transcripts to recordings. Then I was also building the metadata. So Peg and her team, Jamie and their team, really provided a lot of metadata, which was great, a lot of descriptive information for all the files. So I already had a great spreadsheet to start off with, but I worked with our metadata librarian for control vocabularies that we can make available, and also formatting of the existing metadata to prepare it for upload into our repository, which is Omeka. We use Omeka as our public-facing site. So to build that site, again, I collaborate with my colleagues, John Fitzgerald for the server, and also Chris Sauerwald for basically helping me with the display of all these different media types for each record, which I'm going to show you. This is just a screenshot of our spreadsheet for all the metadata that we uploaded. I like to color code so I could just get a little bit of a better handle on which interviews actually were together on each file. So this helped me organize that information in my head, so I knew what interviews went together for the site. And here's a screenshot, which I'll go into the site shortly, but this is a screenshot of one of the interviews. I just wanted to point out here that you see all the different types of files. So we have the recording, and then the transcript, and then a photo, and then the consent form. So that required help from Chris Sauerwald, the multimedia resources specialist I work very closely with in building this site. We deal with one viewer for all the different files, but since we had a recording and PDF files and JPEGs, the viewer really wasn't working well for all these different types. So he was able to get this working as a stacked option. So you can listen to the recording and still look at the transcript and the photo. But this is kind of what I want to point out. What I was saying earlier about having better oral history tools is that we would really like to have a recording and with a transcript, a timestamp transcript moving along with the recording in the future. So that's something we're working on. So a few challenges for building this collection. As I mentioned before, a lot of the files that were related to each interview were not together. So when I first looked at the project folder that I was presented with, I thought, wow, this is great. Everything looks really organized. But then I realized that it wasn't organized in a way that I could work with, because we had, I think I have a screenshot of it actually. So this is I took a screenshot of our project, our Google project folder, and you'll notice like we have the transcriptions in one folder, consent forms in another folder, and then the actual interviews in another folder. So I had to find each of those files and put them together. So the interviewees photograph, their transcript and their recording and any photos. I had to gather those all, try to figure them out, like which ones belong together and put them all each in their individual folders. So that was a little bit of a challenge. It took some time. Again, I had student help for that. And then also, which is great that Peg and Jamie wanted to make this collection as open as possible. Before I created the digital collection, so there were a lot of members of the SVU community that were able to actually access that Google Drive folder. And then I realized that I needed to make my own working folder not accessible. So you'll see Omeka site gets updated. Please do not edit anything in this folder, because I couldn't have anyone altering anything I had in that folder because I was in the middle of organizing. So that was a learning curve for me. I'm not used to having outsiders come into a folder, a working folder. So I had to make sure I restricted access to that folder. But everyone still had full access to all the folders that Peg and Jamie had provided in that folder, in the working folder.
Thanks, Victoria. That's wonderful.
Am I running out of time?
Yeah, maybe just one more minute, because I'd like to do something with the audience if we could.
Okay. I think that I just have the site open. I was just going to open the site and just go through the interviews. We have, this is the homepage, a related work where students had created
we have research projects ongoing.
Projects, yeah.
Projects are there. All of the people in anticipation of the symposium were interviewed by students. So there was a lot of, as you can see, a lot of material that was brought together in this digital collection, and a lot of different people became involved in it and used their particular skills. So that was very useful.
And then we always create a terms of use page for every digital collection. And this collection, each person that was interviewed signed a release form. So we have an image of that release form. So anyone using the site or who wants to use any of the files within this collection is aware of how they can use the files for their own research, which I think is really important, especially for oral history projects, since interviewees, there's privacy concerns and
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I know that it's kind of funny when you look at research and you think, oh, it's so great. And then you realize all of the things that go into making this successful. And so I think one of the things that Shafeek and Victoria in particular did was do that, and really, really valuable for that perspective. So thank you very much. Okay, so I want to have an interactive experience with the audience. I'm hoping this works. Who knows, but we're going to try it. I'm going to show you materials, interview materials from the library's collection for Savitaban Vershabai. And I would like you to write in the chat box any impressions or thoughts that you have about it, whether questions that you have, things that spur ideas, whatever it may be. So I think that we can do that pretty easily. Let me see. Famous last words, right? So let's see if I can share the screen. And here I have what Jamie just showed you. What Victoria just showed you, which here is Savitaban Vershabai Vagari. So I want to read to you the profile description that we gave Christian, that he used for his portion, for the introductory portion, to introduce the collection. And then I'm going to ask you to, and then I'm going to go through the various components that, that Victoria represented. So here, this is the profile description that we gave Christian. Savitaban is a middle-aged married woman with 6 grown children, none of whom ever went to school. As day laborers, they lived hand-to-mouth existence, hoping for 2 or 3 days of work a week. When the floods came 2 years ago, their crops of grains were washed away and their home was destroyed, so they relocated to a nearby high school. Her family borrowed money from a private money lender who charged them 36% annual interest. With no work and huge debts, Savitaban summarized their lives simply: if we have food, we eat. Otherwise, we don't eat. And so that's sort of the synopsis description. And what you have in this collection then, we have about 48 interviews or 41 interviews. You have, of course, the recording, the actual recording in the field, which we were really happy to have the help of Drupti Thakkar. Drupti, are you there? I hope so. And Drupti helped us with that. Then you have, and I'm going to be playing that in a minute, then you have the transcript, which is, let's see if I can get the transcript. There it is. To open up the transcript just so you can see it a little bit. Here we go. So in this, you can see, I'm going to pull this up. Yeah. So you can see all of our interview questions. We spent a lot of time, obviously, working on the questions and what other things that we talked about with Savitaban. Okay. And then, I hope I don't lose anything. I might. Nope, didn't. Good. Yes. Then we also have the photo, as you see above. And then as Victoria mentioned, we have the consent form, the interview release form, which we had everyone sign, simply because we wanted to make sure that they consented, obviously, to us showing this interview, but also to give them some credit. One of the things that I really am very, very interested in is making sure that these voices are not just voices that you hear, but rather are real people to you. And I think that to see them and recognize them and respect them is very important for that. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Experiment. I'm going to play the MP3 recording for 2 minutes only. And I'm going to ask you, members of our audience, to, in the chat box, just record any thoughts that come to mind. Don't think too hard. Just quickly write down your ideas relating to Savitaban. Okay, so ready? Are you ready? Set, go.
ઘરમાં છોકરા છે અહીંયા કેટલા કેટલા 2 દીકરા 1 દીકરી કેટલા છોકરા 2 બેનો 2 જુદા છે તમારા ભેગા નહીં રહેતા છોકરીઓ લગન કરી સાસરે છોકરીઓ સાસરે કે કેટલી હતી 4 છોકરાઓ 2 પણ 2 અલગ રહે ભણેલા છોકરાઓ ના કઈ ભણ્યા નથી એ મજૂરી કરે ચારે છોકરીઓ ભણીને એમની બહુ આવી હતી ને ઓ એમની બહુ હતી કોણ કાળીબેન કનુભાઈ ઓ કાળીબેન કનુભાઈ એમના બહુ એમની બહુ હતા એની સાસુ બરાબર તો તમે રોજ શું કરવાનું મજૂરી કોક બોલા તો મજૂરી કરવા દે બેઠા નહીં તો ઘરે ઘરે શું કરો આખો દાડો ઘરકામ કરીએ હવે આપણે શું મજૂરી થાય ને એ ઘરકામ કરીએ મજૂરી અહીંયા નજીકમાં કરો કે બહારગામ કરવા જાઓ હા એ જ ગામમાં મળે તો કરવાની ના મળે તો કઈ નહીં બરાબર ન મળે પછી ઘર કઈ રીતે ચાલે 2-4 દાડા દઈએ એટલે 1-2 દાડા ના દઈએ તો ઘર લાયા હોય એટલું ખાઈ જઈએ રોજે રોજનું એક દાડો 2 દાડા મજૂરી ના મળે તો પછી ખાઈ જવાય ને ઘરમાં હોય God bless you. બરાબર. બીજું કાંઈ ઘરમાં તમે મજૂરી ન મળે તો એનાથી શું થાય? બીજા કાંઈ તકલીફો પડે દોહાડોની? તકલીફ તો પડે જ ને, આપણે વાપરવા ખાવા ચાહિદા આપવું હોય તો બેન તકલીફ તો પડે જ ને. તેના 4 દીકરીઓ પરણાઈ તો.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now. And now if you could please just write in your chat box any ideas that you had or thoughts that you had about this particular person or collections that you thought of that might be of interest. It would be really interesting to see what you said, what you thought.
Or even just questions that arise.
Yeah, right? Or even just questions that arrive. You can, Drupti, are you there?
Yes.
There you are. Yes. Thank you. It's great to see you, Drupti. Drupti was,
in a while.
Drupti was our interpreter. And so we really wanted to honor her and help her. Drupti, you might just want to speak a little bit about your experience as an interpreter in the field.
Yeah, it was quite emotional experience. Brought up in India, right in the same state. Me and Drupti went to the same. We did our undergrad together for 4 years. So I was never exposed to that part of the world, I should say. Very different than. I mean, by no means we were rich, but we were middle class. But this was a very different side of life that I got to see in those 2 days when I was with you guys. And was someone crying at the end is the question. Yes, there could be. There were some people who were in tears when they were sharing their stories. And till I'd get back those memories and get back to the tears as well. But yeah, it's very rough to see people spending that kind of life with no resources as such at their expense and no way out, basically. So it is very hard, a circle of life, unfortunately. And what she said was she had 2 sons, 4 daughters, and all of them were uneducated. So pretty much son and themselves were all working whatever they could as daily laborers and right there in their same town. And if they didn't get anything, basically they didn't have food on the plate. So it was very, very humbling and feel so blessed that you are you're not born in those kind of situations where you could be you have no way out, basically, and count your blessings where you are and what you have. You may be complaining and whining about small things that you don't get in life, and then this opens up a very different picture that you are so blessed.
Thank you, Drupti. Thank you so much. In fact, there were times when Drupti and I were, and Jamie actually, were just, really almost weeping, and in some cases were, just to see that. So that was a really interesting question that somebody, could think about that. And it might be something that we might not have put into our own investigations. I mean, actually, I tried the experiment for myself, and what I was focusing on was, well, what would school look like for these people? Would they be, are they, education is great, but what would it look like? And then I recalled somebody saying, a farmer saying, well, we don't send our girls to school because it's too dangerous. So there's lots of different topics that kind of come out. The fact that there's lots of background noise, sometimes interrupting, is interesting and important to see because you're right there. I mean, there's people behind you. So it's
that's culture, basically. Sorry to interrupt, but that's culture. Everybody's in everybody's business, basically, and that's what was going on.
Good.
At that point.
So you might do a study and you might think more about what is the background like. That's really fascinating. Christian brought up this idea of resilience and strength and how strong people must be to work through this. And, certainly And Kathleen also talked about the options and the few options that people have in life. And I think that's one of the things that Jamie and I brought up, and Jamie in particular, what we were saying, I'm sort of saying this for her, but that we didn't, we didn't really realize the assumptions that we had when we went out into the field.
Yeah, we did.
So, do you want to speak a little bit about that, Jamie?
Yeah, I mean, and it's just like, like I was saying earlier, and then Peg continued saying, sometimes we're not always like able to recognize the assumptions that we're making, and that's just something that we all do. And so I'm sure a lot of you, as you listened to that recording just now, right? Like maybe you thought of things that, you might not think are necessarily true, or things that, society has influenced your understanding of, right? Things that, aren't maybe necessarily accurate, or other assumptions. And I think through this process of listening, and Peg and I being there and trying to understand and trying to listen was really important to how we think about how, society at large impacts us, and allowed us to I think be better researchers in some ways. And
definitely, and be better researchers too by listening to what other people are saying. For example, Sophie mentioned it seemed to be somewhat cathartic to tell her story, and there was no hesitation in her voice. And that's true, there was no hesitation. It was, this is life, this is the way it is. And to think about that, the tone as well as the content is really very, very significant. So I'm pleased for that. Shumaila Fatima says she has strong willpower. She reminds of an organization that she works for that assists women like Savitaban. So you'll find other connections, like Christian was looking at, showing us these different networks and different connections that he had in his in the architectural. This is, and as we add to our project, I'm sure we will find more of these stories and more ideas on how to look at this. And then finally, I have one from Michelle Whitaker. When I did human rights work in the northern Iraq a decade ago, I didn't know of online tools, which is true. I mean, I remember when I was writing my dissertation research in China, I had a whole trunk. I just had a trunk of materials that I mailed back to the United States, hoping that they would arrive. And yet here we have these different things that we've been able to really think about, and have the online tools that will help us really think about human rights, of course. And so thank you, Craig, for that point as well. So I think that those are some of that's my experiment for you as to ways that you can look at the collections and make your own ideas. Let's see, I want to see if I'm not sure who's all here now yet. Narita, is Drupti or Biplop, are you there? Can we unmute you? I'm not sure.
Yes, hello.
Hello, yay. Drupti, how are you?
Yes, yes, I'm fine. Yes, listening.
What time is it, your time of the day now?
Oh my God, it is the midnight of our Diwali festival.
Oh my God. Oh, thank you for coming. I mean, the Diwali, as we all know, Diwali is very, very significant. And so thank you for attending and showing us. And we really look forward to more ideas and ways that we can enrich this project. So I really appreciate that. Did you have any thoughts you would like to add?
No, I'm amazing. I mean, impressed with the way we have started to talk in, I think, 2016 or 2017. And right now at the present day, I can see the work, I mean, the mirroring hope. And so it is a wonderful journey altogether we have crossed till date. And I'm sure in futures, we will have the more opportunities to to go in depth with this kind of research, and also it will help to access the, like Savita Ben is across the globe, you know, it is not only in Gujarat.
Sure.
And you made it possible that other Savita Bens can access the Bhungroo resources, at least aware about the Bhungroo through this technology. So this is the wonderful use of this technology. And really in this journey, Jamie and Drupti voluntarily help us, and it was wonderful. And I have totally given the freedom to your team, you, Jamie and Drupti, to collect the data independently. You know, I have not interfered. Even I have never any kind of the virtual translations as well as this, I mean, factual translations. I never did it. What do you understand? What do you pick up from the field? And what did you interpret it in your own way? That is most important for us, because we are in this field, so we can learn something out of your sharing and out of your learnings, and we can much better way we can serve the another Savita Bens. But it is wonderful, I think, only because of the few days of the field work. You did wonderful work, not knowing the language, not knowing about the cultures, traditions, and other things. But you guys did a wonderful job. And still in the Aritha village and some other village, these women are remembering all of you. So whenever I'm going, they are asking that, how are you? So I'm just conveying hi from their end to all of you.
And hi back to them. Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And I think, Jamie, one of the things we discovered, Jamie and I discovered, is, you know, we learned a lot. I mean, it's not, that's why the title is Mirroring Hope, you know, because it's really mirror. It's the fact that we both are understanding the boundaries and the depth, actually, of what it means to hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the process, I think, you know, we all became a little less alienated. You know, we have a little more connection, right? We have a little more community. And that, you know, I'm just eternally grateful for. Thank you for everything that you've done for us, Drupti, and Drupti too. You know, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we had limited resources, you know, so one of the things that I think is interesting for students too is to realize that, you know, you can take just a small amount and make a big difference for yourself and others. And I think that's really great. We have a few more things that I'll just mention. We're kind of running out of time, so if you have anything to put down, please do. But the idea of microloans to women and a cell phone, and a bank account, which is something that another program, the UNFCCC program, uses. It is the W Plus program, which is really which has a center in Nepal, and so there are ways to try to integrate and think about those. There's somebody else here who's a filmmaker who's wondering about the documentary possibilities, and I think that is absolutely. I mean, Shafeek in one meeting prior to this had said to us, "Are you going to make a documentary?" And it may be, you know, we could possibly do something like that. We also have from Kathleen, thank you, Kathleen, about the idea of the Wheels Foundation, which provides water to rural populations in India. It may be a very good way to connect as well. Happy Diwali, and definitely we would like to meet the president of Wheels, of course. Is there anything else anybody would like to discuss? Please, we can unmute you. We have about 5 minutes left. Victoria?
Yeah, I just wanted to also say that not only was it a great learning experience for me as far as building oral history projects, because every project is different, so I always learn something, but I love, you know, just being able to learn more about the collections that you bring to the library has always been exciting and such a great learning experience for me. And not just me, but even all the students that I work with. So they really get involved in all the material, listening to the recordings, I really like, we spent a lot of time listening to recordings. And even though we're not familiar with the language, you could just, like you were saying before, hearing the tone, listening to all the background noises, was just a great experience for myself and the students I work with. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we actually had Jasmeet Kaur, who was a graduate student in the Department of Asian and Asian American Studies, tapped into her friends and Stony Brook students, as well as some other students on campus who helped with the translation. You know, once we had them, and what we discovered was really interesting is that some of the students from Gujarat who grew up in Ahmedabad, for example, a city center, they didn't, it wasn't this, the translation was not easy from Arita and Dudka and other places, you know, that we really had to work on the translations to make sure that they were right. Anybody else have any questions or thoughts that they would like to add or things? You can use the hand wave function, I guess, to ask a question or just go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can wave at me. I'll see if I can get that, the waving. There we go. I get to see everybody now. Okay, Richard, Rich, would you like to say something? Let's see if I can unmute you. There. Wait a minute. I have to unmute you.
Okay.
There I go.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's been fascinating, but I apologize. My internet service crashed, you know, about, I guess, 20 minutes ago. So I didn't get everything. But what I got was very thought-provoking, and look forward to talking later about this. Thanks.
Oh, sure. No problem. Great. Anybody else? I'm so happy to see the faces now. I've got them. Anybody waving at me? Okay. All right. Well, I just want to say a couple more things, two more things, and then I'm going to let you go, because it really does illustrate the way in which so many different people can become involved in even a small project like this. We had many co-researchers, as we've expressed here, and the people that even signed up for this this particular Zoom lunch were just, it was amazing. I mean, we had Stony Brook students from departments of writing and rhetoric, from the international affairs, globalization, international relations, Asian studies. We had somebody from the food labs at Stony Brook University. And so that's really encouraging to see this, all of these people working together. We also had somebody from the Brookings Institute sign up, and from Energy Watch, and from the Stimson Center, as Rich was there, and from various universities, Indiana University Southeast, of course, Jamie's University of South Florida, and then Sustainable Harvest, which is another NGO that's very interested in food distribution projects, and Kathleen Mystery's organization of advisors that really is very much involved in making the world better for others in less fortunate positions. So thanks to everybody.
Yes, thank you.
Very much so. Okay, so I guess this is pretty much the end of the session. But I can stay around for a few minutes, and if anybody has further questions for me and Jamie, just fire away. Okay, and have a very nice day, everyone.
Yes, thank you again.
Thank you, Peg. Thank you, Jamie. Speaking as interim director of the Humanities Institute, this is a model of what we dream. The Humanities Institute can serve as a hub for bringing together people from all different disciplines, and Peg and Jamie, the way that you have made bridges around the world and brought so many different disciplines, so many different voices into this conversation. I'm just honored to have you here, Peg, and I understand that you couldn't stay here forever, Jamie, so I don't hold it. But thank you so much for the work you've done, the work you continue to do. And thank you to Victoria, still from the library. it's the infrastructure of the life of the mind in all of its manifestations, and the way that what we do at the university can reach more broadly. So thank you to you also.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for coming.
Thanks, Susan. All right, bye everybody.